In the heart of the Nevada desert, a wounded Navy SEAL lay motionless beside his bleeding German shepherd, both left to die under the burning sun. But then, a 12-year-old boy appeared, barefoot, carrying nothing but a half-empty bottle of water, and a courage that would change everything. He didn't know the soldier's past, or the secret buried beneath the sand. What happened next will make you cry, and believe that even in the desert, miracles still find a way to bloom. Before we start, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The Nevada sun was merciless that morning. The air shimmered above the cracked highway like liquid glass. Every gust of wind carried sand and heat, scraping the world raw. Out here, 100 miles from the nearest city, even sound seemed to melt before it reached your ears. At the edge of this emptiness stood a small trailer park called Coyote Flats. A scattering of rusted RVs, broken fences, and laundry lines strung between desert willows. It was home to the forgotten and the quiet. Among them was Eli Turner, 12 years old, small for his age but wiry from climbing rocks and chasing stray dogs. His skin was tanned to a deep bronze, freckled from too many summers without sunscreen. His eyes were the pale blue of faraway water, sharp, searching, always listening. Eli wasn't like the other kids at school. They called him Dust Boy. Slow, strange, the one who talked to animals more than people. But Walter, his grandfather, said the boy had a heart that listens to things most folks don't bother hearing. That morning, Eli had been listening. He stood on the ridge behind the trailer, scanning the desert through a pair of cracked binoculars. The wind howled like an angry thing, pulling at his shirt. Somewhere out there, his dog Scout, a brown mutt with one floppy ear, had vanished the night before during a dust storm. "Come on, Scout," Eli whispered, voice catching in the heat. "You can't be gone too far." Behind him, the old screen door creaked. Walter Turner stepped out slowly, leaning on a cane. He was 70, tall but bent from years of labor, his shoulders stooped but his voice still firm. His skin was a map of wrinkles and sunspots, his gray hair kept short beneath a battered sheriff's cap, the last relic of his life before retirement. Walter had once been a cop in Reno, known for his calm temper and stubborn sense of justice. That life had ended when his partner died in a roadside ambush, and Walter had moved to the desert to forget. "Boy," he called, his voice gravelly but kind, "don't go too far. The heat'll kill you faster than thirst." "I'll just check past the ridge," Eli shouted back, already sliding down the slope of sand. Walter sighed, watching his grandson disappear into the wavering horizon. "That kid's got more heart than sense," he muttered. The farther Eli walked, the more the world turned silent. Cicadas screamed in the creosote bushes. The sand shimmered like gold dust. His shoes left faint prints that vanished behind him with every gust. By noon, his water bottle was half empty. He paused under the skeletal shadow of a power pole, wiping sweat from his forehead. The horizon quivered, turning into a blur of light and mirage. Then, a sound. Not the wind, not an animal, something deeper, heavier. A groan. Eli froze. His heartbeat echoed in his ears. He turned toward the sound and spotted a thin column of smoke in the distance. Faint, but real. He hesitated for a moment, remembering his grandfather's warning, then started walking toward it. The wreck came into view slowly. A charred pickup truck, its hood twisted, its tires melted into black puddles. The stench of burned oil hung thick in the air. The sand around it was scorched in a circle, and beside it lay two shapes. At first, Eli thought they were both dead. Then the larger one moved. It was a man, Jack Hayes, though Eli didn't know his name yet. His face was streaked with dirt and dried blood, his short hair the color of ash and sweat. He looked about 38, lean but strong, the kind of strength carved by discipline and war. His left arm was bent awkwardly, his uniform, desert tan, torn and half burned, revealing a tattoo along his forearm. SEAL Team 7. There was a quiet authority about him, even unconscious. The kind of stillness that said this man had seen hell before and come back from it. Next to him lay a German shepherd, fur matted and dark with blood. The dog's chest rose and fell faintly, breath shallow. A silver tag on its collar read, Rex, K9 Unit. Eli's throat tightened. He crouched, whispering, Hey, mister, can you hear me? No answer, only the low wheeze of heat and dust. He reached for his water bottle, uncapped it, and poured a few drops onto the man's cracked lips. The water vanished instantly into the dust, but the man's eyelids fluttered. Stay with me, Eli murmured, voice trembling. Don't die out here. Rex let out a weak growl, baring his teeth as the boy leaned closer. Eli froze, heart hammering. The dog's eyes, amber and intelligent, locked on his face. It's okay, he whispered, holding his palms open. I'm trying to help. After a tense moment, Rex blinked and lowered his head back onto the sand. Trust, or exhaustion, had won. Eli looked around for shade and spotted a low rock ledge nearby. He dragged the man's body inch by inch, sweat soaking his shirt, arms trembling from effort. The dog limped after them, collapsing beside his master. When they were out of the direct sun, Eli sat down, gasping for breath. Up close, Jack's face looked older than his years, roughened by scars along the jaw and a faint line across his temple where shrapnel must have grazed him. His dog tags glinted faintly beneath the dust. Eli brushed sand from them, reading the name aloud. Jack. Hayes. The sound of it felt strange in his mouth, like something important he shouldn't know yet. He tore a strip from his shirt and gently wrapped it around Rex's bleeding paw. The dog winced, but didn't move. Good boy, Eli murmured. You've done enough. Then he took the last sip of water himself and leaned back against the stone, breathing hard. The world shimmered again. Too bright, too quiet. Hours passed. Shadows lengthened. The desert cooled, trading fire for chill. Eli kept watch, afraid to sleep. Every so often he'd hear a coyote call or the whisper of sand shifting. The man stirred once, muttering something incoherent. Cole, stay low, extraction point, before slipping back into silence. Cole, Eli whispered, frowning. The name meant nothing to him, but he repeated it softly like a clue in a mystery. When the stars began to prick the sky, he saw headlights far off in the distance, a lone car crossing the highway. He waved, but the vehicle kept going, swallowed by the dark. He looked down at the soldier again. Guess it's just us, huh? Rex's ear twitched. Back at Coyote Flats, Walter paced the porch, cane tapping against the boards. The desert night had fallen cold and violet. He stared toward the ridge, the one his grandson had crossed hours ago. Come on, boy, he muttered. Don't make an old man worry. Inside the trailer, a police radio crackled faintly, one Walter kept for emergencies. Static filled the air, then a broken signal. Unidentified crash site. Possible military vehicle. Coordinates unknown. Walter froze. The voice was from a county dispatcher 30 miles north. He felt something stir, the old instinct from his days as a sheriff. Trouble had found its way back to his desert. He reached for his hat. Back under the stars, Eli pressed his palm against Jack's chest. The faint heartbeat was still there. You're not dying tonight, he whispered. He looked at Rex, the dog's eyes half open, reflecting the moonlight. And you, Eli said softly, you're coming too. He gathered dry branches and lit a small fire using a flint he carried in his backpack, his grandfather's old habit. The flames cast a weak orange glow on the trio. The boy, the soldier, and the dog huddled against the vastness of the desert. For the first time in his short life, Eli wasn't afraid of the dark. He was too busy keeping two lives alive. You. The evening wind rolled low across the desert, carrying the faint scent of gasoline and dust. Walter Turner adjusted the strap of his old flashlight and squinted toward the horizon. His knees ached, and his back throbbed the way it always did when a storm was coming, though there wasn't a cloud in sight. "Damn it, Eli," he muttered, stepping off the porch. "You said you'd be back before sundown." He called out again, his tone sharp, echoing into the empty dark. "Eli!" No answer, only the whisper of dry brush and the far-off creak of a power line swaying in the heat. Walter grabbed his truck keys and slid into the driver's seat of an old Ford that coughed before starting. The headlights cut through the sand haze, picking out the small footprints he knew by heart, his grandson's, heading toward the dunes west of the camp. "That boy," he grumbled, driving slow, scanning the empty road. Miles away, under the fractured moonlight, Eli Turner was kneeling beside the motionless soldier. The boy's small chest rose and fell fast, breath trembling between fear and determination. The campfire he'd built from scrap wood flickered weakly, casting trembling light across the man's face. "Hey," Eli whispered, brushing sand from the man's uniform. "You need to wake up now." His voice cracked, part command, part prayer. Jack Hayes woke not long after, groggy, the world tilted sideways. The first thing he saw was a halo of firelight, then a boy's silhouette against the stars. His pulse spiked. For a dizzy instant, he thought it was Cole, his son, that same small frame, that same blonde hair. "Cole," he rasped, his throat raw as sandpaper. Eli's head jerked up. "No, sir. My name's Eli. You're hurt. Don't move yet." Jack tried to sit, pain tearing through his ribs. His voice came out rough, defensive. "Where am I?" "About 3 miles from Dusty Ridge," Eli answered. "Your truck blew up. I saw the smoke." Jack looked past him, spotting Rex. The dog's ears flicked, tail thumped faintly. "You helped him?" Jack asked. "Both of you," Eli said simply. "Didn't seem right to leave anyone." The soldier swallowed hard. His head pounded, but beneath the dizziness there was something else. Guilt, the kind that never healed. By dawn, Jack's fever had spiked. He lay wrapped in a blanket Eli had carried from his pack, skin pale, breathing shallow. The boy sat nearby, exhausted, eyes rimmed red from sleeplessness. Rex pressed close against Jack's shoulder, occasionally nudging his arm as if urging him to fight. When Jack opened his eyes again, it was morning. The sun burned pale gold across the desert. He tried to sit, and this time managed halfway before Eli steadied him. "Easy," the boy said softly. "You've been out almost all night." Jack blinked, taking in the surroundings, the melted truck, the small camp, the dog lying protectively beside him. He saw the boy's hands, small and blistered from dragging him, the half-empty water bottle beside the fire. "You shouldn't have done that," Jack murmured. "You could have died out here." Eli gave a tired shrug. "Guess we both didn't." As Jack leaned back, something caught Eli's attention. A small metal plate, half buried in the sand near the truck wreck. He dug it out, brushing off grit. It was a broken radio device, military issue. On the side, almost erased, were the words, "Operation Talon." Jack noticed and stiffened. "Put that down," he said sharply. His tone was command, the kind that made soldiers move. Eli hesitated, then obeyed, but his eyes stayed on the object. "You Army?" the boy asked after a while. Jack didn't answer. His gaze wandered to the dog, to the horizon, then back to the fire. "Was," he said finally, "a long time ago." When Walter arrived, the sun was already high. He found Eli crouched near the soldier, and the sight froze him. His grandson sitting beside a man in torn military fatigues, a dog at his feet. "Eli," Walter barked, "step away from him." Eli turned quickly. "He's not dangerous, Grandpa. He's hurt." Walter approached slowly, hand instinctively near the revolver he still carried from his sheriff days. His sharp gray eyes swept over Jack, then the wreck. "What happened here?" Jack's voice came low, weary. "Ambush. I was following a lead. Didn't expect company." Walter frowned. "Company? You mean whoever did this might still be nearby?" "Maybe," Jack said quietly. "Maybe not." Walter crouched beside his grandson, still wary. "You got a name, soldier?" "Jack Hayes," came the reply. "Navy SEAL, retired." Walter exhaled. "I used to wear a badge myself. Sheriff out of Clark County." His tone softened slightly. "Guess neither of us sleep easy anymore." That night, back at the trailer, Jack rested on a cot while Walter brewed coffee over the old stove. Eli sat near Rex, who lay at his feet, amber eyes half closed. For the first time, the dog allowed Eli to brush the dirt from his fur. "He likes you," Jack said quietly from across the room. Eli smiled faintly. "Guess we both don't scare easy." Walter sipped his coffee, watching the two. "You should call someone, Hayes. Military, police, anyone." Jack shook his head. "Can't. Not yet." Eli glanced up. "Why?" Jack looked at the floor. "Because not everyone in uniform is on the right side anymore." After dinner, Eli sat by Jack's bedside with a worn paperback in his lap. He hesitated, then began reading aloud. "The Old Man and the Sea." His voice was rough but steady, carrying softly through the trailer's quiet. Jack lay still, listening. As the boy read the part where Santiago dreams of lions on the beach, Jack's eyes filled with something heavy, unspoken. He turned his face away, a tear tracing the edge of his. Scar. When the story ended, Eli closed the book gently. "You okay?" he asked. Jack nodded faintly. "That story. It's about losing everything and still fighting. Reminds me of someone I used to know." Eli smiled shyly. "You?" Jack shook his head. "No, someone better." Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the old trailer walls. Rex shifted closer to Eli, curling beside his chair. Walter watched from the doorway, arms folded, his expression unreadable. He didn't trust the stranger yet, but he trusted what he saw. A broken soldier finding peace in the voice of a boy who refused to give up. And for the first time since Dusty Creek turned silent, the night inside that tiny trailer didn't feel empty. Somewhere between pain and quiet gratitude, between a soldier's shadow and a child's stubborn hope, something began to heal. The wind over Nevada carried a dry heat that shimmered above the dunes, painting the morning in strokes of copper and dust. Jack sat outside the trailer wrapped in an old wool blanket, elbows resting on his knees, watching sunlight crawl across the ridges. His short brown hair was matted with sweat, his jaw rough with 3 days of stubble, and the faint scar running along it caught the light like a faded wound. Beside him, Rex rested his head on Jack's boot, eyes half closed but alert. Across from them, Eli sat in a folding chair, barefoot, swinging one leg nervously as he ate from a can of beans. His face was burnt red by the sun, freckles dusted across his nose, and his blonde hair stuck up at the crown, refusing to be tamed. Jack broke the silence first, voice low, hoarse, heavy with something that sounded like regret. "You ever heard of Operation Talon?" Eli looked up, spoon midair. "It was written on that broken radio," he said. "I didn't touch it again. I figured it was military." Jack gave a faint, bitter smile. "Yeah, military." His brown eyes clouded. "It was supposed to be a transport unit. Only, we weren't moving gear." Eli frowned. "Then what were you moving?" Jack's hand trembled slightly as he ran his thumb along the edge of the tin cup between his fingers. "People," he said at last. "Women. Children, hidden in crates labeled classified cargo. We were told it was for relocation. Protection, they said. But it wasn't. They were selling them, moving them like stolen property. When I found out, I reported it. That's when everything went to hell." The boy's spoon clattered onto the ground. What happened? They killed the team, burned the records, said we died in a fuel explosion. My partner Cole, he didn't make it out. Jack's voice cracked, quiet, nearly breaking. They left me in the desert to die, and they would have finished the job if you hadn't shown up. Eli looked down at his scraped knees, silent for a long moment. So, they're still out there, he said. Yeah, Jack murmured, and they'll come for that drive when they find out I'm not dead. The trailer door creaked open behind them. Walter stepped out, the morning light cutting across his silver hair and worn face. He looked at the two with suspicion and something almost protective. You two planning to share what all that whispering's about? He asked, his voice gravelly from sleep. Jack met his gaze evenly. Just the truth. Walter squinted. Truth gets men killed quicker than bullets. Eli glanced between them. Grandpa, we can help him. He didn't do anything wrong. Walter sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Eli, you've got the heart of your grandmother and none of her sense. This man's trouble, even if he don't mean to be. Jack said nothing, eyes turned toward the endless desert. By noon, the sky was a sheet of white heat. Walter's truck sat parked behind the trailer, paint faded and mirrors cracked from years of sun. Eli stood in front of the driver's door, small hands gripping the wheel through the open window. Walter leaned against the side, watching with arms crossed. You stall it. You walk back, the old man warned. Eli grinned nervously. Got it. He pressed the clutch, the engine sputtered, coughed, then roared to life. The truck jerked forward in a cloud of dust. Inside, Jack braced himself, one hand gripping the dashboard. He's got guts, he said with a half smile. Walter gave him a side glance. He's got my truck. That's all I care about. After several tries and a few sharp words from Walter, the boy finally eased the truck around the bend. The steering wheel looked oversized in his small hands, and every bump made his shoulders tighten. But when they stopped again, a small, proud grin spread across his sunburned face. That evening, the desert turned amber. They sat outside the trailer again, the heat easing, shadows growing longer. Jack stretched his legs, Rex lying beside him with his muzzle resting on a forearm, fur catching the light like molten gold. I need to get to Echo Base, Jack said quietly. That's where it started. It's about 10 miles west, near the solar fields. The evidence I need is still there. Walter frowned deeply. You're not dragging the boy into that. Jack shook his head. I'm not dragging him anywhere, but I need to go. Eli spoke before his grandfather could answer. Then I'll drive you. Walter turned on him sharply. The hell you will. But Eli didn't back down. You always said doing what's right's the only way to sleep at night. Well, I'm not sleeping if we don't help him. For a moment, only the sound of cicadas filled the air. Then Walter sighed, shoulders sagging. You got half her fire, he muttered. Fine, you take the truck, but you're back before sundown. You hear me? Eli nodded solemnly. By late afternoon, the small pickup rolled across the dirt road, the wind howling through broken windows. Jack sat in the passenger seat, still pale but stronger. He watched the boy concentrate fiercely on the road, freckles bright against sunburned skin. You remind me of someone, Jack said softly. Your son? Eli asked. Jack nodded once. Cole was about your age when I left for my last deployment. He loved dogs, too. Said one day he'd train one like Rex. Eli glanced at the German shepherd resting in the truck bed, tongue lolling as the wind whipped his fur. He looks like he's been through a war. Jack's eyes softened. He has. They drove in silence as the landscape opened around them. A vast field of broken solar panels glittering under the lowering sun, each reflecting a distorted mirror of the sky. Metal frames creaked in the heat. Jack motioned for Eli to stop. This was the field, he murmured. I hid here once, after Talon fell apart. The panels made good cover from drones. I thought it was over back then. Eli cut the engine. But it wasn't. Jack's lips curved into a hollow smile. No, some ghosts don't stay buried. Rex stirred suddenly, ears pricking. The dog's muscles tensed, nose lifting to the wind. His tail stiffened, then a low growl rolled from his throat. Jack reacted instantly. Old instinct, hand going to the rifle resting between the seats. "What is it, boy?" Rex sniffed again, then barked once, sharp and urgent. The air carried a faint metallic tang. Gasoline, burned rubber, and something darker underneath. Jack climbed out, crouched low, and touched the sand. It was still damp. "Gasoline," he muttered. "Fresh." Eli stepped closer, worry spreading across his freckled face. "You think they followed you?" Jack looked west, where the horizon shimmered. "No, they were here first." The wind picked up, blowing grit into their eyes. Jack stood, scanning the ridges. "We move at first light," he said finally. "Echo Base is 10 miles from here. We walk." Eli frowned. "Grandpa said be back before sundown." Jack smiled faintly. "Then we better make it worth the trouble." As the sun sank, they parked the truck behind a ridge and made a small fire. The orange glow flickered across their faces, the scar on Jack's jaw, the lines of fatigue under Eli's eyes, the soft twitch of Rex's ear. "You don't have to do this," Jack said quietly. Eli shook his head. "You didn't have to tell me the truth either, but you did." For a long time, the two sat in silence. Rex dozed between them, the firelight painting his fur in shades of gold and red. Far to the west, the last light caught the rusted remains of a metal sign, half buried in the sand. The letters were nearly gone, but one word could still be made out through the dust. Echo. Jack followed the glow with his eyes, his heart heavy and unsteady. "Tomorrow," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "We find what's left." Eli nodded, tucking the blanket tighter around his shoulders. The wind hummed softly, carrying the scent of old metal and ash. In that quiet, beneath the empty Nevada sky, a boy, a soldier, and a wounded dog waited, not yet knowing what waited for them inside the ruins beyond the ridge. The wind had shifted by dawn. What had been a quiet desert night was now a world of red dust and trembling air. The first light revealed the remnants of Echo Base, a jagged bunker half buried under the sand, its concrete walls scorched, steel doors warped from decades of heat. Jack Hayes stood before it, his brown hair tousled by the gusts, his scar catching the thin light like a faded memory of war. The soldier's face was drawn but focused, eyes scanning the rusted metal that once marked the entrance to something secret. Beside him, the 12-year-old boy adjusted the strap of his worn backpack. Eli's messy blonde hair clung to his forehead, sweat tracing lines down freckled cheeks. His gray t-shirt was torn at the sleeve, and his blue eyes glimmered with both fear and determination. At his side, Rex, the 6-year-old German shepherd with black and tan fur, stood rigid, muscles tensed, nose twitching as he sniffed the air. Jack brushed dust from a rusted control panel and murmured, "This place used to be alive. Command center, comms room, everything. Now it's a tomb." Eli stepped closer, his voice trembling. "Then why come back?" "Because tombs keep secrets," Jack said, pulling a small flashlight from his pocket. "And this one holds proof." Inside, the bunker smelled of iron, ash, and silence. The air was thick, unmoving. Old papers littered the floor, their edges curled and blackened by time. Rex padded ahead, sniffing each corridor cautiously, tail low. A faint echo trailed their footsteps, the sound of ghosts and sand grinding under boots. Jack's light swept across the wall, revealing faded military markings. Talon Unit, Secure, Comm Node 04. He inhaled sharply, as if the air itself carried memories he wished he could forget. Then, in a small room with shattered monitors, he stopped. A single locker, half open, leaned against the wall. Inside, wrapped in a thermal blanket, was a small metal case stamped with the same insignia. A hawk and blade entwined. Eli crouched beside him. "Is that it?" Jack nodded, his hand steady despite the tremor in his voice. "It's the archive drive. Every operation record, every comm line, everything Travis Hale didn't want anyone to see." The name came out bitterly. Colonel Travis Hale. Jack had once trusted him, followed his orders without question. But Hale had sold out his own men to protect the trafficking network they'd uncovered. He had orchestrated the explosion that wiped out their unit and left Jack for dead. Jack connected the drive to a portable reader. The screen blinked, static, flickering, then images appeared. Grainy footage of soldiers unloading crates, then people, terrified, shoved into armored trucks. Hale's voice came through the static, calm, professional, a man masking horror with discipline. "Seal the cargo. No survivors outside manifest." Eli turned away, his voice small. "That's proof, isn't it?" Jack's jaw tightened. "It's enough to hang him twice." The lights flickered suddenly. Rex lifted his head, ears pricking. Jack froze, sensing movement outside the bunker. Then came the faint sound of tires over sand, followed by a mechanical click, the unmistakable sound of a rifle being readied. "Down!" Jack hissed. They ducked behind a console just as bullets tore through the outer wall. Shards of metal and dust exploded across the room. Rex barked furiously, darting forward, then stopping only when Jack raised a hand. The soldier's instincts came alive again, calm in chaos. Eli pressed against the floor, voice shaking. "Who are they?" "Mercenaries," Jack said through gritted teeth. "Talon's cleanup crew." The bunker shook with another blast. Jack peeked around the corner. 4 figures in tactical gear, moving with precision, faces masked, weapons fitted with silencers. One man barked orders in clipped English, his voice sharp and commanding. That was Marcus Vane, a broad-shouldered mercenary in his early 40s with close-cropped black hair and a jagged scar over his temple. He'd been part of Talon before it fell. A loyalist to Hale, ruthless and cold. "Find the drive," Marcus shouted. "No witnesses." Jack fired a short burst from his rifle, driving them back into the hallway. Dust filled the air. Rex lunged forward, teeth bared, grabbing one attacker's arm as he entered. The mercenary screamed, swinging his rifle wildly. Jack's shot ended it a moment later. "Go, Rex," Jack commanded. The German shepherd released the man and limped back, panting, amber eyes burning with adrenaline. Blood streaked his paw. "Jack, you're bleeding," Eli cried. A bullet had grazed Jack's shoulder, staining his sleeve. "I've had worse," Jack said, trying to smile but failing. "We're not dying here." He shoved the drive into Eli's pack. "Take this and find a control room. There's an emergency broadcast system. Red lever on the wall. If you can get it running, it'll ping the sheriff's network." Eli hesitated, pale but nodding. "What about you?" "I'll buy you time." The boy ran, ducking behind debris. Rex followed him for a few steps, then turned back as Jack shouted orders. The bunker roared again as grenades rattled the ceiling. Smoke poured through the cracks, thick and choking. Eli stumbled into the electrical room, coughing. The metal panels were covered in soot, wires exposed like veins. He found the red lever Jack had described, but the power switch was fused. Heart-hammering, he scanned the room and spotted a generator, half buried under dust. He turned the crank desperately, sparks flying. The old system sputtered to life, humming weakly. Then alarms blared, a piercing siren echoing through the desert. The base's sprinklers erupted, mixing water and dust into a choking fog. Outside, Marcus cursed. He triggered the failsafe. Get it done. A column of steel loosened from the ceiling and crashed into the electrical room. Eli screamed, frozen, until Rex slammed into him, knocking him clear. The boy landed hard against the wall, coughing, staring as the beam crushed Rex's hind leg. "Rex!" Eli crawled toward him, tears streaking through grime. The dog whined, eyes wide but calm, licking the boy's wrist as if to say, "It's all right." Jack appeared in the doorway, bloodied, half limping. His left arm hung uselessly, but his eyes, fierce, burning, were alive. He dropped his rifle, hooked his arms under Rex's body, and heaved. "Come on, old friend, you're not dying here." The fire from a nearby console spread quickly, licking up the walls. The air turned molten. Jack staggered toward the exit, carrying Rex against his chest. Behind him, Eli clutched the drive tight and followed through the collapsing hallway. Outside, the wind howled like a living thing. Jack fell to his knees beside the truck, cradling Rex. The dog's fur was slick with soot, but his chest still rose and fell, shallow but steady. Eli grabbed the radio from the dashboard, shouting, "Sheriff! Sheriff, this is Dusty Ridge. There's a soldier hurt. We're at Echo Base. There are traitors here. Please, hurry." Static hissed. Then a calm, steady voice cut through. "Copy that, son. Hold tight. We've got your signal." Lightning streaked across the horizon, a sandstorm rolling in from the west. The roar grew until the world was a wall of dust and sound. Through the swirling chaos, the faint glimmer of headlights appeared, red and blue piercing the haze. The sirens grew louder, closer, and as the storm swallowed Echo Base, a voice shouted through the wind, "Sheriff Monroe, drop your weapons." Jack, bleeding and burned, looked up just long enough to see the silhouettes of deputies emerging from the dust, their flashlights cutting through smoke like salvation. He smiled weakly. "Told you we weren't dying here." Then the desert took the rest. Fire, smoke, and wind swirling into one. The desert had changed in the passing weeks. What once carried the scent of smoke and ruin now smelled faintly of rain and cedar. The storms had washed away the ashes of Echo Base, and the sand, in its quiet mercy, had covered what was left. Morning light broke across the horizon, revealing a small ranch house at the edge of Dusty Ridge. It was old, weathered, but alive. Laughter had begun to fill the place again. Jack Hayes stood near the porch fence, the same scar tracing his jaw but now softer against the warmth of the sun. He wore a clean white t-shirt and a veteran's cap faded from years of service. His left arm was bandaged but healing, the wound now little more than a memory. Beside him sat Rex, the 6-year-old German shepherd with black and tan fur, now strong again after weeks of care. The dog's amber eyes followed every movement around the yard, a soldier's discipline still intact, though his days of fighting were over. From inside the house came the sound of clattering dishes and a young boy's laughter. Eli Turner, 12 years old, freckled, blonde-haired, wearing a loose blue shirt too big for him, darted through the doorway holding a certificate nearly as large as his chest. The paper bore an official seal and bold letters, Junior Hero Award, Nevada Sheriff's Department. "Grandpa, look," he called out, waving it high. Walter Turner, now 72 but as sharp as ever, sat in his favorite rocking chair on the porch. His silver hair gleamed under the morning light, and his worn hands rested on his cane. His smile came slow but proud. "You earned that, boy," he said, his voice gravelly but warm. "Not every 12-year-old gets the law to call him a hero." Eli laughed. "Jack said it was mostly Rex." Walter chuckled. "That dog's got the heart of a soldier, but so do you, son." Jack stepped closer, leaning against the porch post. "He's not wrong," he said quietly. "That night at Echo Base, you didn't freeze. You acted. You saved lives." Eli looked down, cheeks flushed. "You would have done the same." Jack smiled faintly. "Maybe, but sometimes courage looks a little different when it's borrowed from hope." Later that day, they drove into town for the small ceremony outside the sheriff's office. Sheriff Monroe, a tall white woman in her 50s with auburn hair and a firm but kind expression, stood waiting by the steps. Her uniform was crisp, her eyes steady, the kind of person who carried both authority and compassion in equal measure. She shook Jack's hand first. "Colonel Hale's in custody," she said. "The footage you recovered was enough to bring him down for good. You did the right thing." Jack nodded. He betrayed his men. They deserve justice. Monroe looked toward Eli. "And you, young man, I think you deserve this." She knelt slightly, pinning a small silver badge on his shirt, the same emblem worn by Nevada's first responders. Eli grinned so wide it nearly split his freckles. "I'll keep it safe," he said solemnly. Rex sat beside him, tail thumping, tongue out in a wide, panting smile. Monroe crouched to scratch behind his ear. "And this one," she said with a chuckle, "might be the bravest officer I've ever met." Cameras flashed, the crowd applauded, and for the first time in years, Jack didn't flinch at the sound of applause. He stood straight, shoulders squared, not as a soldier haunted by ghosts, but as a man who had found a reason to stay. Weeks later, Jack used the government compensation fund to purchase an old training ground outside town, once a police K-9 facility, now renamed Echo Home. It wasn't much yet, a few kennels, a stable, and a wide yard surrounded by sun-bleached fences. But every morning, veterans came, men and women scarred by memory, drawn by the promise of quiet healing and the bond of dogs like Rex. Jack trained them himself, his movements patient, voice calm. Sometimes he'd stop mid-lesson, watching Rex guide a trembling veteran through his first steps without fear. "He teaches better than I do," Jack would joke softly. But in truth, those sessions saved him too. Eli came by every weekend, helping clean kennels and feed the dogs. He was small but steady, learning responsibility in the rhythm of care. Walter often joined, sitting nearby with a thermos of coffee, giving quiet advice. "You see, Jack," the old man said one afternoon, watching the boy toss a ball to Rex, "you spent years trying to forget the war, but maybe God didn't want you to forget. Maybe he wanted you to remember differently." Jack turned to him, puzzled. "Differently?" Walter smiled faintly. "You thought you were meant to fight battles. Turns out you were meant to teach others how to stop fighting themselves." Jack said nothing for a long moment. Then he nodded. Maybe the mission didn't end. It just changed. The evenings were the best part of the day. When the desert cooled and the sky turned from gold to indigo, the three of them would sit outside the porch, watching stars blink alive one by one. The wind hummed through the dry grass and the smell of pine drifted from the nearby ridge. Rex often rested his head on Eli's lap, eyes half closed, tail gently tapping the floor. On one such evening, Eli climbed onto the roof, holding an old, tattered American flag folded carefully in his hands. The fabric was sun-bleached, its edges frayed. The same flag that had hung at Echo Base years ago. Jack steadied the ladder as the boy reached the peak. "Easy up there," Jack called, smiling. Eli grinned down at him. "I got it." He tied the last knot and stepped back, the flag catching the evening breeze. The stars and stripes unfurled slowly, glowing red and white under the crimson horizon. Rex barked 3 times, sharp and proud as if saluting. Walter leaned forward in his chair, voice low, but clear. "You know, Jack," he said, "sometimes it takes a child to remind a man what home means." Jack looked up at Eli, the boy framed against the flag and the rising stars. His heart stirred with something old and sacred. Not victory, not survival, but grace. As twilight deepened, Eli climbed down and stood beside him. "We found each other in the dust," he said softly, eyes reflecting the last traces of sunset. "And that's enough to call it home." Jack rested a hand on the boy's shoulder, his voice quiet. "Yeah," he whispered, "it's enough." Behind them, the wind carried the faint sound of the flag flapping, steady like a heartbeat. And above, the first stars broke through the darkening sky, bright and endless, as if heaven itself was watching. When you feel lost in your own desert, remember this story. Maybe your miracle won't come as thunder from the sky. Maybe it'll come as someone who refuses to give up on you. If this story touched your heart, share it. Leave a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Type Amen in the comments if you believe that God still sends miracles to those who keep faith. And if you believe in love, in hope, and in second chances, don't forget to subscribe so more souls can find their light again. May God bless you and everyone you hold dear.